Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. We're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. The night started with a sharp knot in David Miller's chest. His wife, Vanessa, had been pushing him for weeks to attend her company's annual gala. "It'll be good for us," she had said with a rehearsed smile, smoothing down her emerald dress in the mirror. "You'll finally see how successful people carry themselves." Her words stung, as if a steady job as a contractor wasn't good enough for her. David had always been a simple man, hardworking, dedicated, and maybe not rolling in money, but proud of what he'd built with his own hands. Yet Vanessa had changed in the last year, growing distant, always glued to her phone, always talking about her boss, Richard Harper, the wealthy CEO who treated his employees more like ornaments than people. David's gut told him something wasn't right, but he pushed it down. Tonight, he told himself, he'd support her, smile through the discomfort, and maybe remind her why she once looked at him with love instead of contempt. The hotel ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers, golden drapery, and the hum of laughter mixed with clinking champagne glasses. Vanessa seemed to glow under the lights, her arm linked tightly with David's as they entered. Yet the moment she spotted Richard across the room, her hand slipped away like he didn't exist. "David, let's go say hello," she said briskly, pulling him forward. Richard stood with a circle of executives, broad-shouldered, grinning with that smug confidence only men used to power carried. His eyes raked over Vanessa in a way that made David's fists clench before the introductions even began. "Vanessa," Richard said, ignoring David almost entirely as he leaned closer. "You look absolutely stunning tonight." David extended his hand politely. "David Miller, her husband." Richard gave it the weakest shake possible, smirking. "Ah yes, the husband. I've heard so much about you." His tone made it sound like an insult dressed as politeness. As the minutes ticked on, David noticed how Vanessa laughed too loudly at Richard's comments, how she brushed his arm unnecessarily, and worst of all, how Richard didn't hesitate to place his hand on the small of her back, even as David stood inches away. The crowd didn't miss it either. Whispers began to circulate, eyes darting between the three of them. David felt the humiliation burning into his skin. He wanted to confront her, to drag her out of there, but the betrayal was so fresh, so sharp, he froze. Vanessa tilted her head toward him with a mocking half-smile, as though daring him to react. "Relax, David," she murmured under her breath, her lips still curved in a smile for Richard's benefit. "Don't embarrass me in front of real men." The words cut deeper than any knife. David knew then, this wasn't about celebration. This was about her showing him just how little she respected him anymore. But if Vanessa thought David was going to stand there like a weak man and let his dignity be trampled, she was about to learn he had sharper edges than she ever imagined. David forced himself to remain still, even as Richard's hand lingered on Vanessa's lower back a little too long. His blood boiled, but he swallowed hard, eyes narrowing. Years of construction work had taught him patience. Measure twice, cut once. If he erupted too soon, he'd be the fool. No, he needed the right moment, one that would sting far more than a drunken outburst. The ballroom buzzed with chatter, but David could hear his heartbeat louder than the jazz band playing in the background. He excused himself from Vanessa's side under the pretense of grabbing a drink. She barely looked his way. That was fine. It gave him room to think. At the bar, he ordered a whiskey neat, letting the burn settle his nerves. He scanned the room, watching the scene unfold. Richard was parading Vanessa around like she was already his trophy, introducing her to clients, executives, even slipping his arm around her waist. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was theatrical. She wanted him to see it. David's mind replayed the last few months like broken glass. Vanessa working late almost every night, the unexplained shopping bags tucked into the back of the closet, the distant ways she avoided intimacy, always saying she was too tired. He had believed her, trusted her, thinking she was chasing career growth. But now the truth screamed his face. "Rough night," a voice said beside him. David turned to see a woman, mid-30s, sharp suit, clear eyes, nursing her own glass of wine. She introduced herself as Claire Donovan, one of the company's legal advisors. "You could say that," David muttered. Her eyes flicked toward Vanessa and Richard across the room. You're her husband, right? I'm sorry. I can't tell you how many times I've watched him overstep. Richard thinks he owns people, especially women who work for him. David clenched his jaw. Claire didn't know the half of it, but her words lit a spark inside him. Maybe Vanessa wasn't just betraying him. Maybe she was playing into a dangerous game she didn't fully understand. Thanks, he said tightly, sipping his drink. He didn't want pity. He wanted justice. Minutes passed. Vanessa caught his eye once or twice, smirking like she enjoyed twisting the knife. Then, the moment that shifted everything, Richard leaned in far too close, whispering something that made Vanessa throw her head back in exaggerated laughter. And then, he brushed his hand across her hip, bold as daylight, while everyone watched. Gasps rippled in the crowd. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others stared openly, waiting for David's reaction. Vanessa tilted her chin proudly, as if daring him to explode, to cause a scene that would humiliate him further. But David didn't move. He simply finished his whiskey, set the glass down gently, and walked toward them with calm precision. His silence made the air around him electric. Guests parted, whispering. "Richard," David said evenly, his voice carrying across the circle of executives. "I think you've forgotten yourself." Richard smirked, not loosening his grip on Vanessa. "Come on, Dave. Don't take it so seriously. She's just enjoying herself." "She's my wife," David said, his tone sharp enough to slice through the music. Vanessa's eyes gleamed with defiance. "Stop being so dramatic. You're embarrassing me." But it wasn't David who looked embarrassed. It was Richard, who now faced the full weight of David's stare. The CEO chuckled, leaning closer, his whiskey breath hot and arrogant. "What are you going to do about it? You're just a blue-collar husband in a room full of people who matter." For a moment, silence stretched. David could feel the crowd's tension, waiting for him to either crumble or explode. He did neither. Instead, he smiled faintly, a dangerous calm in his eyes. "Funny thing about men like you," David said softly, though everyone could hear. "You think money gives you the right to touch whatever isn't yours. But tonight, you're about to learn what happens when you overstep." Before Richard could laugh, David's fist connected with his jaw in one swift, controlled strike. The sound cracked louder than the music. Gasps and shrieks filled the air as Richard stumbled backward, clutching his mouth. A tooth flew across the polished floor, skittering like a piece of broken glass until it stopped near the feet of a stunned guest. The room froze. Champagne glasses trembled in nervous hands. Richard groaned, spitting blood into a napkin. Vanessa's face drained of color. "You're insane," she hissed at David, but her voice cracked with panic. David didn't flinch. He straightened his jacket, breathing steady. "No, I'm done being silent. You humiliated me in front of strangers, Vanessa. You want a show? Well, now you've got one." Security hesitated at the edges of the crowd, unsure whether to step in. Guests murmured, half horrified, half thrilled by the spectacle. Richard, red-faced and humiliated, tried to recover his dignity. "You'll regret this." "I'll." David cut him off, his voice like steel. "You've already lost more than you realize." Because in that moment, David wasn't just striking back physically. He was setting the stage for something bigger, something far more devastating than one broken tooth. Vanessa didn't know it yet, but David had already discovered things she thought were hidden. The secret credit card bills, the email she thought she deleted, and most importantly, the contract that tied her too closely to Richard's side. David had been patient, but patience was over. Now came the reckoning. And as Richard staggered, humiliated in front of his empire, David's plan clicked into place. This wasn't the end. This was just the opening act of his revenge. The ballroom remained frozen, everyone whispering in hushed tones as Richard tried to regain his balance, pressing a napkin against his bleeding lip. Vanessa clutched his arm protectively, glaring at David like he had ruined her night. But the truth was clear. David hadn't destroyed anything. He had only peeled back the facade she'd been hiding behind. "Come on, Richard," Vanessa muttered, her voice low but audible to those nearby. "Let's get you cleaned up." "He's not worth it." David almost laughed. Not worth it. He had just exposed Richard's arrogance in front of the very people he used to command respect from. That single punch had shifted the power dynamic in the room. But David wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. As Vanessa guided Richard away, David walked calmly back to the bar. He needed them to think he was done. He needed them to think he had spent his fury in that single strike. Only then could he move unseen while his real plan unfolded. Hours earlier, before even stepping foot into the Gala, David had prepared for this possibility. His suspicion hadn't been blind. He had already discovered Vanessa's secret credit card, charges at luxury boutiques and high-end restaurants that didn't match their household budget. And the email. That email was the key. It wasn't just flirtation. It was proof. A chain of messages between Vanessa and Richard, discussing not only their affair, but also her willingness to leverage David's construction business contacts for Richard's projects. She hadn't just betrayed him emotionally. She had betrayed him financially, too. Claire Donovan, the legal advisor David had spoken with earlier, approached him once more. She lowered her voice. You know, the board has been circling Richard for months. Too many scandals, too much arrogance. What you did tonight might have been the final nail in his coffin. David's lips curved slightly. Good to know, because I've got something that'll bury him. She raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? David didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Just watch. On the massive projection screen at the end of the ballroom, the one that had been looping company achievements all night, the feed suddenly changed. The room fell silent as Richard's voice filled the speakers. Don't worry, Vanessa, his voice echoed, dripping with arrogance. Once your husband is out of the way, you'll have everything you've ever wanted. Money, power, all of it. He's just dead weight. The email chain scrolled across the giant screen. Words in black and white. Richard's name. Vanessa's replies. Their mocking tone as they called David a fool who doesn't know his place. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Executives exchanged horrified glances. Guests pulled out their phones, recording everything. Vanessa shrieked. Turn it off. David, what did you do? David stepped forward, his calm presence commanding more attention than her panic. I did what you never expected. I stopped being blind. You wanted me humiliated tonight. Instead, you've exposed yourself and your boss to the very people you were trying to impress. Richard shoved past a few people, face crimson. You'll pay for this, he barked. But Claire moved between them, her voice sharp. No, Richard. You'll be answering to the board. They won't forgive this. Not after tonight. The executives, once laughing with Richard, now turned their backs on him. He had lost their respect, and without respect, his empire was crumbling. Vanessa, meanwhile, looked pale, trembling as though the ground beneath her had given way. David, please, don't do this to me. You don't understand. He cut her off coldly. No, Vanessa, I understand perfectly. You traded love for greed. You traded loyalty for lust. And you thought I'd never fight back. Tonight wasn't about your success. It was about showing me how small you thought I was. But here's the truth. His voice thundered in the now silent ballroom. I was the only one holding you up. Without me, you fall. The words hit harder than his fist had earlier. Guests murmured in agreement. Even some of Vanessa's so-called friends avoided her gaze. Vanessa reached for him, desperate now. David, please, we can work this out. I made a mistake. But David stepped back. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is misplacing your keys. What you did was a choice. Repeated, planned, and broadcast for everyone to see. The final blow wasn't physical. It was emotional. In front of the glittering crowd, in front of the man she had chosen over her husband, Vanessa had lost everything. Respect, security, and her mask of superiority. David turned toward the exit, his stride steady, his shoulders squared. He didn't look back, not once. He didn't need to. Behind him, Richard's empire was collapsing, Vanessa was crumbling, and the world had finally seen them for who they really were. But this wasn't just an ending for David. It was the start of his rebirth. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's simply walking away, leaving the guilty to choke on their own downfall. The hotel's double doors closed behind David with a dull thud, shutting out the chaos of the gala. For the first time in months, his chest felt lighter. The night air was crisp, a quiet contrast to the storm of betrayal he had just endured inside. He loosened his tie, inhaling deeply, the neon glow of the city lights reflecting in his eyes. But even outside, whispers followed. Guests streamed out minutes later, phones in hand, buzzing with disbelief over what they had just witnessed. Richard Harper, untouchable CEO, humiliated and exposed. Vanessa Miller, once the perfect trophy wife, now revealed as complicit in her own downfall. And David, the man they underestimated? He had left with his dignity intact, and the upper hand no one expected. The next morning, headlines spread across business forums and social media feeds. Someone had leaked the video of the gala. Richard's words, Vanessa's laughter, the damning emails. Every ugly detail was now public. Board members scrambled into emergency meetings. Investors pulled out. By noon, Richard Harper's resignation, for personal reasons, was announced, though everyone knew it wasn't voluntary. David sat at his kitchen table, sipping black coffee, his phone buzzing nonstop with notifications. He ignored most of them, only answering one call. Claire Donovan. "You should know," Claire said, her tone sharp yet laced with a hint of admiration. "You didn't just embarrass Richard. You finished him. The board is moving forward without him. Frankly, they're relieved someone forced this mess into the open." David leaned back in his chair. Good. Maybe now the company can be run with some actual integrity. There was a pause. "And Vanessa?" Claire asked carefully. David's jaw tightened. "She made her choice long before last night." And as if on cue, a knock rattled the front door. David knew before opening it who it would be. Vanessa stood there, eyes bloodshot, her once flawless appearance now unraveling. She clutched her purse like it was a lifeline. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, can we talk?" He didn't move aside. "Talk? You had months to talk. Instead, you chose secrets and sneers." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was stupid. I thought Richard could give me the life I wanted. But when it all fell apart, I realized you were the only one who ever truly cared about me." Her words, once they might have pierced him, now rang hollow. He studied her carefully, weighing the sincerity against the image of her laughing with Richard in that ballroom. "Vanessa," he said slowly, "love without loyalty isn't love. And respect, you shattered that in front of the entire city. What exactly are you asking for now?" She reached for his arm, desperate. "Another chance. I'll change, I swear. Just don't give up on us." David stepped back, her hand falling to her side. His voice was steady, but there was steel beneath it. "You didn't just betray me, Vanessa. You betrayed yourself. And no matter what you say now, I can't forget the look on your face when you wanted me small, humiliated, beneath you. That wasn't an accident. That was who you chose to become." Her shoulders slumped, sobs breaking free. She tried again, but David quietly closed the door. For the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy, it felt freeing. Over the following weeks, Vanessa spiraled further. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be tied to scandal. Her job disappeared after the board discovered her role in Richard's schemes. Luxury shopping trips were replaced with collection calls. Every choice she had made came back to choke her. Meanwhile, David's life took an unexpected turn. A local paper picked up the story of the husband who stood tall. Interviews followed. Suddenly, clients sought him out, impressed not just by his craftsmanship, but by his integrity. His construction business flourished, contracts pouring in from people who valued honesty over arrogance. One evening, as David locked up his workshop, Claire stopped by. She carried a bottle of wine and an amused smile. "You've become something of a folk hero," she teased. "The man who stood up to the untouchable CEO." David chuckled softly. "I didn't do it for attention. I just did what any man should when pushed too far." She tilted her head, studying him. "Still, it's rare to see someone walk away with their dignity in one hand and a new life in the other. Most people either explode or crumble. You measured twice, then cut once. Clean and precise." Her words made him smile, but deeper than that, they reminded him of something important. Revenge wasn't just about tearing others down. It was about rising above. That night, as they shared a quiet drink, David realized something. He didn't need Vanessa's validation anymore. He didn't need Richard's approval. He had rediscovered his own worth. The revenge had been satisfying, yes. Watching Richard's empire collapse, seeing Vanessa face the weight of her choices, it gave him closure. But what truly mattered was what came after. Growth, respect, and peace. Because real revenge isn't about a broken tooth or public humiliation. It's about proving to yourself that betrayal can't define you, that you can walk away stronger than ever, while the guilty are left to drown in the mess they created. And as David raised his glass that night, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He hadn't lost a wife. He had shed a burden, and in doing so, he had won back his life.